Okay, welcome back. I am going to go ahead and do the gummies tonight, so I wanted to show you how I do that. I will put a link to the elderberry syrup recipe that I used to create the syrup. Of course, the syrup lasts for at least about 2 months as the syrup form, and you can actually use that. We make elderberry tea, a couple tablespoons of that in some hot water, and you've got elderberry tea. It's very good. The Yeti chef, Yeti, the main Yeti, he has that every day. So the gummies are nice because they are, you just use gelatin, and you can take 2 to 3 a day. Now the gummies don't last as long. They'll only last for about 14 days. So if you are going to make gummies, you need to make sure that you actually are using them. But you want to put them in an airtight container and store that in the refrigerator. But I'm going to turn the camera around and show you how we're going to make the gummies. Alright, so the things that I need to make the gummy recipe, of course, is the elderberry syrup. And I do see that it's probably going to leak on me, so it may make a mess here in a minute. Some apple juice. Now, I did try it with apple juice, and it was okay. I have found that apple white grape juice, however, is better. So you can play it around. It does need to be a lighter juice, not a dark juice. And well, I don't know, maybe it can be a dark juice. I guess comment if you've made elderberry gummies before and used dark juice. So the other item that you definitely have to make gummies is gelatin. So that can be found in the baking area, also in the canning area. You need at least 2 packets of this. Now the recipe that I will share that I made the syrup, there's a link to a gummy recipe, and the lady, that recipe uses 3, tried it with 3. They get very, they're gelatin, they're like they're like a gummy, but it's harder to chew. So I found that 2 is really all you need in this recipe. So a measuring cup, because we are going to have to measure out the elderberry syrup and the juice. And of course you need a mold to be able to put the gummies in. So my mother-in-law, Shirley, sent this to us when the kids were little, and I never really got to make jelly beans in here, jigglers, but this is perfect for our gummy sizes that we need, because you need to have a mold that's going to be small enough that you can have a daily serving size of 2 or 3 of the gummies. You don't want to make them too big. So let's get started. And you also need a small pot, because this part you do have to use your stove. The elderberry syrup recipe, I used an Instant Pot recipe, and the Instant Pot does all the work for you. So if you don't have one of those, I highly recommend getting that. Okay, so measuring out, you need to have, I opened up the elderberry syrup, so I'm going to have to, I may have to come back here in a second, but elderberry syrup, just make sure when you take it out of the refrigerator that you shake that up, because it is going to settle a little bit. Even from straining after you make it. So we're going to put in 1/4 cup of the elderberry syrup. Okay, it did kind of drip a little bit, so I'll have to clean that up a little bit later. So let me get this. So you're going to need a cup altogether. So the elderberry syrup I pour in first, and then the juice I pour in second. And that would go up to a measure of 1 cup total. So it's 1/4 cup elderberry syrup and 3/4 cup of your juice. And that's going to go in your small pot. Okay, just pour that right in there. And then you want to turn your burner on about medium heat, because this does need to heat up a little bit before you put in your gelatin. So while that is heating up, I'm gonna jump off real quick and clean up my mess, and we'll be right back. All right, folks, I'm back. So I cleaned up my mess, and now I'm going to put the gelatin in. So I went ahead and opened up both packages, and we're just gonna dump that in the pot. The next step is that you need to make sure that you whisk, or you can use a spoon, whichever you want to use. So what I learned from the first batch, with the 3 gelatin packets, mind you, is that I whisked it the Yeti's gonna make fun of me because of the way I just said whisked it. But I used my whisk and I went around and was whisking it pretty quickly because it said, oh, you need to make sure that it melts, and which you do. I need to make sure that it gets in there pretty well mixed in, and that's why you have to heat it up so that the gelatin will kind of melt in the liquid. But you see all these bubbles? So my first batch had lots of bubbles in it. So when you pour this out, the bubbles stay. They don't go away. I guess I could have poked them with toothpicks, but you know, it didn't bother me. They still were the same. It wasn't like I was making them for anybody else, but I am going to whisk this because there are some bigger chunks in there, looks like, and then I can always, they'll be fine for us. I did make these for without a lot of the bubbles. The second batch, the second time around, when I learned that the gelatin, you really only needed the 2 packets, I made some for some neighbors. Hopefully they're watching and they're feeling better. But this is not a cure, of course. It's just an extra immune booster. And right now, in the times that we're in, I mean, even before this, we were starting this regimen, excuse me. See, he'll make fun of me for that too. But we had started using this just because of some of the health challenges and internal gut things that some of us have here in the household, that this would be a good addition to our daily vitamin intake. So that's kind of mixed in, and look, the bubbles are popping, so maybe I ought to just leave it here for a minute. You don't want this to boil, you just want to have it heated up enough that it's going to melt your gelatin, and then you're going to remove it from the heat and we're going to pour it into the molds. So let's take a pause and we'll do that. Alright, so we're now ready to get this in our mold. So I'm going to pour this into, I'm going to make it easier to get into these smaller molds because I would not want to use a pot to do that. So excuse me, but so I have a smaller Pyrex. Of course, it's a cup of liquid, so you're not going to need a huge container to do this. And that's just found it easier to put it in something smaller to be able to fill the molds. So you're just going to fill each mold up to the top, and you know, you can go over them. It's perfectly fine because they're just going to fall into the next well anyway. And we'll fill these up and get this done pretty quick. Because I've done this before, I know to about where I need to go on the mold. Again, this isn't hard, folks. I mean, this is pretty simple for, you know, getting some good nutrition in your body, vitamins, all it's natural. I bought the elderberries on Amazon. I could put a link to that as well in the description if you're interested. Dried elderberries, and I think the bag was maybe $12, and I still have half the bag left, and this is my 4th batch. So last 2 weeks it's doing really well for us. So once you pour those in the molds, this mold needs to go in the refrigerator for at least an hour before you try to take it out. So we're going to do that, and then I'll come back and show you how I get them out of the mold and what I store them in. Alright guys, the gummies are finished. I did leave them in a little bit longer than an hour because I was uploading another video from earlier with cutting up the peppers and the fresh produce storage, and we were also catching up on some of our YouTube channels that we like to watch to see what they're up to. So I'm gonna show you the finished product and how I get them out of the mold, and we just store it in a mason jar or another airtight container. Alright, so here is the mold of all the gummies, and we are going to, I just use a toothpick, and what I did not, if you notice when I started pouring, I didn't mention that, but when I started pouring in the mold, I don't spray anything in here. Now, I think if you were to put something in here, to keep things from sticking, which I haven't had any issues with mine sticking, but it would add a flavor to it, and I'm not sure if you'd want a slimy flavor like if you used olive oil or spray or something like that. That probably would not be good. So what I do is I go around the mold here just a couple times to release it. You can see it's coming up, and then just kind of lift up and it comes out. And then I just put it over in my mason jar. So I'm not going to continue doing this for the whole mold here for you guys to see. This takes, you know, a little bit, and I don't really want to do 5 more minutes of me taking the molds out, but that's kind of all there is to it. And again, you just put the lid on and mason jar, put it in the fridge, and they are good for 2 weeks. So make sure that if you are making a batch like this, so this is enough for the entire Yeti family. It's mainly the main Yeti, Mike is his name, and our son Logan, he also has been using these, and myself. So we take, Mike and I are both doing 3 a day, which is the most that you really should have. Of course, with any natural or vitamins, you know, you want to be careful that you don't take too many. I don't really know how many is too many, but if you have young kids and you're going to use this, just make sure that they know that they can only have the 1 or 2, likely for younger kids, and then you know, follow the same recommendations as regular vitamins. Age 12 and up, the 2 to 3 should be fine. But don't quote me on that. I have not done research about that, so definitely check that out on your own if you have questions. And like I mentioned before, when I was making it, I will be sure to put the link to the elderberry recipe that I used on Pinterest, and I did modify that recipe. Just make sure when you go to that link inside the elderberry syrup recipe that you know I used 2 packets of gelatin. I mean, go ahead and try it with the 3 if you want, and make that decision for yourself, but I just really felt that 3 packets of gelatin was just too much. So everybody have a good night, and we'll see you next time.